So we're doing two things at once here. We're harvesting our potatoes, of course, but we're also getting this this bed ready for next year. Right, we're preparing it for the coming year. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I'm out here in the garden today. It's like the first weekend in September 2021, harvesting some potatoes. I can't remember what variety I planted here, but they're definitely ready to be harvested. So I thought while I was harvesting these, I would talk a little bit about harvesting potatoes, when to harvest them, how to store them, just sort of everything potatoes when it comes to the other end of the process, right? It's time for these to come out. I probably should have harvested these a couple weeks ago. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on here. But anyway, let's get started, and hopefully I don't have a fire ant nest in here. It seems to be there everywhere this year. So when to harvest potatoes? When the plants die. You can see this plant here has died, right? And of course before your frost comes, right? Because some of the potatoes are close to the surface, like this one right here, right? Close to the surface, and if there's a frost, the potato can be damaged by the frost, and then you can use it right away if it's only partially damaged, but they do not store well if they're compromised in that way, right? But also, so when the plant dies, yes. And you know, there is one logic, a way of thinking where you just leave them in the ground and take them as you need them. Personally, and I'm going to only speak to my experience, but I would advise against that. There's lots of different things that can attack your potatoes when they're just sitting in the ground. And I'll run through the list of those, but the longer you leave them in the ground, the greater the risk that something's going to get at them. And I mean, number one, it can ruin the potato, but number two, it can just compromise it, and such that it doesn't store properly, right? So, I mean, really, these should have been harvested maybe middle of August, these ones here. These are red Norland variety. Another reason to harvest them in August, these would have been planted in May. You plant them when you start seeing dandelion flowers, is that the soil is nice and dry. And so it's just easier to dry them out and cure them because you're already partway there with the dry soil. So we've had a couple rains, and we're sort of getting into hurricane season here. We don't get a lot of hurricanes here in Nova Scotia, but we do get the tail end of hurricanes. We get tropical storms and a lot of rain and stuff like that. We just had one the other day. I can't remember the name of it, but sort of one passing through. So I just stabbed that one. Darn it. So that's why you don't want to wait too long once the plants die, because there's all kinds of pests that can get at them. You've got various insects that will bore into the potato, but in addition to that, you've got voles, right? These sort of like mouse-like things. So moles, M-O-L-E-S, don't bother your potatoes. They're carnivores. They eat insects for the most part, or other, you know, they'll eat just about anything. They'll eat the chicken bones out of your compost if you let them. But voles are like a little tiny mouse, and they will chew. They usually don't eat a whole potato. They eat like half of it or 1/3 of it. Right? They'll just go at it like that. So, you know, I don't find them to be too much of a problem, but it does happen. And, you know, they get a share of the potato. Now, you're going to ask, why am I using a stick to dig potatoes? Right? There's better digging tools out there. I find that for the most part, sort of pointy stick, this is a traditional kind of digging stick, I guess, would be used by cultures all the way around the world. But I find it's less likely to damage the potato because it's not as sharp as a metal digging tool, right? If you use a pitchfork, you're always skewering the potatoes, and if you use a hand trowel or something like that, you're always slicing the potatoes. And every once in a while you'll stab one with the pointy end of your stick, but it's pretty rare. It's the exception, not the rule. Let me switch sides here. Thought maybe this would be a better camera angle for this harvest. So that's why I like to use a digging stick, and you can sort of use it in a number of ways. You can jam it in the ground and just, you know, use it as a lever like that, right? You can sort of hold it halfway down and sort of pull towards yourself like that, which I tend to do a lot, right? Just like that. It's sort of on an angle and you're just pulling. Works pretty good. And also you can get a second hand in there and almost use it like a canoe paddle, right? And work on it that way. So there's lots of different things you can do. I normally sort of hold it like this and do a little sort of probing thing, right? And until I feel like I've found all the easy to find potatoes in an area, like I have here. And then I'll sort of go into canoe paddle mode, like this, to see if there's anything I missed. There's a big old rock. Here's another one I missed. You always miss a couple. Another one I missed. So the potatoes coming out of here are a reasonably good size. You know, now I'll speak to how I grew these. I just stuck them in the ground about wrist deep. Put, I don't know, about 8 to 12 inches of yard waste mulch over top, and didn't do anything else for the remainder of the growing season. All right, so I've got that done, that area. Let's use this sort of rock here as a gauge. So now my process here is I just smooth that out using the stick. And I've got lots of garden tools. I've tried lots of garden tools, but I tend to like the stick. All right, so now I take the little bit of mulch that hasn't broken down and throw that on the area that I just finished working. So we're doing two things at once here. We're harvesting our potatoes, of course, but we're also getting this this bed ready for next year. Right, we're preparing it for the coming year. I think that's a good section to work there, I think. I think these were mulch. I can just tell by sort of looking at what's left over here by yard waste, and I think there must have been a bit of seaweed in here too, which I always find tends to have a good effect on your potato yield. This garden bed here isn't particularly big. I'd say this is about 4 by 8, maybe slightly smaller than that. 4 feet by 8 feet, maybe slightly smaller. 1 meter by 3 meters is probably accurate if you're metric. But yeah, I think you get the picture. So I'm going to finish digging these, and we'll just fast forward through that process, and then I'll catch up with you. I'll show you what I do with them next. All right, so found some sea junk here. Looks like some sort of water temperature gauge from something. You never know what you're going to find in your seaweed, that's for sure. Anyway, now I'm just using the digging stick to smooth this all back out. And taking whatever, actually this, boy, that's prickly. This raspberry doesn't belong. It's a raspberry bush in a place where I don't want a raspberry bush. I'm just throwing these weeds and just use a digging stick here. Just take the remaining mulch and the few weeds that I've upended here in various parts of the surrounding garden. People are noticing me step on the garden a little bit, and I try not to do that, but I don't approach that like a religion. You know, if it's easier in terms of my body. Oh, look at that, a garlic. It's easier on my body to step on the garden. I step on the garden. You know, this is what I do. Add a little bit of weeding here, some stuff in the area, and just throw this remaining mulch and weeds and stuff over the top. I'll probably throw one more bag of leaves on top of this before, you know, in the next couple weeks as I come across them. People are starting to, you know, put their lawns, do a lot of yard work this time of year, so whatever I can find, some mulch, right? There, this garden bed is ready for next year. And there's our potatoes, right? So, you know, I probably spent 10 minutes planting these. That's all the effort I put into this garden this whole year. I just spent however long that was harvesting, weeding, and preparing the bed for next year. I don't know how long this was, 10, 15 minutes. Probably would have taken me 10 minutes if I wasn't filming a video and trying to do things in ways that, you know, have the right camera angles and try to keep keep my shirt from riding up and showing my underwear and stuff like that. So, you know, it took, let's say 10, 15 minutes at the beginning to plant. No work all season long, and 10 to 15 minutes to harvest at the end. And this bed is ready for whatever I'm going to plant in it next year, probably collard greens, I think, or cabbage or something in that family. That's my plan anyway. Of course, I reserve the right to change my mind, but this bed's all ready for next year. I don't fertilize it, I don't do nothing, I'll just add a little bit more mulch to it. Now let me show you what I do with these potatoes. Sorry if the wind's a bit much. As I've been harvesting these, it rained a couple days ago, so there's a bit of muck on these. Ideally you want to harvest these after like a week of dry days, but I just don't have that convenience today. These sort of have to come out. Once I've harvested them, I like to dump them out, give them a quick rub, and put them back in. This is a great job to get kids to do, right? Because it's hard for them to screw up. My kids are still young enough that I don't find them to be thorough enough for digging the potatoes. I wish they would, because it's a back-breaking work digging potatoes, but I tend to do one bed a day sort of thing, and I find that's at age 49, that's about what my back is willing to do without any complaints, right? So anyway, this is the process for just you know, all the soil that went into this container as I was harvesting the potatoes. I want that soil to stay in the garden, right? I don't want it to go into my garage or wherever these are going to go, right? So that's all I'm doing here. I'll see you at the next step. All right, so the next thing you want to do is dry them out a little bit, cure them before you store them. So today it's a little bit overcast, there's a bit of clouds, and I'm in a nice spot here. There's some wind here. I can feel the wind on my face, but I'm underneath some trees, so there's a bit of shade. It's not too sunny. So just for the day, I'm going to lay these out like this, let the air at them. Sure, there's a little sunlight getting at them, but it's filtered to a large extent. And it's not gonna, there's a certain amount of sunlight that'll turn a potato green and make it toxic, and you know, it's you You know, you probably have to eat a lot to get really sick from it, but they don't taste good when they're green, and they are toxic to varying extents, right? Anyway, it takes a lot of sunlight for that to happen. Certainly, an overcast day filtered through trees for a few hours isn't going to do anything. But this is a very quick way, because there's getting air at them and wind moving around and sitting on top of these dry wood chips, to just get them dry, because you cannot store these until they're dry. Okay? Now, what if you're somewhere where you can't do something like this? Because you just haven't got whatever in your property, you don't have a space like this, right? What do you do then? Well, let me show you. Some days I harvest these and it starts to rain, I got to bring them in. All right, so here's all I do, and I'm sorry for the poor lighting, it's just my garage. But, if it's going to rain or whatever, or even after they've been outside for a day or two, they always get a treatment here anyway, it's part of my process, right? So after they've been outside today, I'll bring them in tonight. I have to put all these away, right? These are ready for storage. So I bring them in, I lay them on the garage floor on cardboard like this. If you lay them right on the concrete, there can be a kind of condensation sweating effect. So any moisture that shows up due to condensation, the paper just wicks it away and it evaporates, and it all seems to sort itself out. Basically, the paper helps to maintain humidity and deal with stuff like that, I've found over the years. You notice I got some garlic over there. I do use the same approach for drying them, right? There's a fan overhead, and it's blowing down, creating some degree of air turbulence here. So I'm indoors in my garage. It's probably, 60 to 70% humidity in here. The humidity in the garage is usually very similar to the humidity outside, because it's not perfectly sealed. Yeah, so I leave them like this for a few days, just to make sure that they're good and dry, okay? And I make sure my family turns the light off and keeps the light off in here and that sort of stuff. So they're basically in the dark in a reasonably cool spot, right? The floor of the garage this time of year might be 12 Celsius, maybe a little bit warmer, something like that, maybe 12, 15. Basically the concrete floor is about the same temperature as the ground right now, give or take, right? The surface of the ground. So I leave them like this for a few days to cure, and then I've done plenty of videos on this. I just put them in cardboard boxes in layers. I'll put a layer of potatoes, some newspaper or cardboard, then another layer of potatoes, and so on, all the way up to the top, and then just close the box, and I just put it over there on the floor in the garage and leave it like that. And depending on the variety of potatoes, some of them will keep till April. I find these are Purple Chiefs here. The red Norlands, I find in the spring, they're the first ones to start making eyes. They're the earliest potato. They're also the earliest ones I can plant. I tend to plant them 3 weeks earlier than the other varieties. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's all you do. You bring them indoors. If you got it spaced like this, put them somewhere where it's not too hot, out of the sunlight, a little bit of airflow. There's different ways you can set that arrangement up, right? Leave them like that for a few days just to make sure that there's no moisture at all, and then box them up and put them somewhere where it's going to stay reasonably. If you've got a cold room, that's ideal, but I find even in the garage here, and I'm looking at the thermometer, the temperature in the garage right now is 20. Okay, but I will box these up, these ones here probably later today, and just put them on the floor. The floor is usually cooler than the air. The garage is 20, the floor is probably 15 or 14 or something like that. I just put the boxes on the floor and leave them in here all winter. At the depth of winter, even if it's minus 20 outside, it's always above zero in here, usually 5 Celsius all winter long. This is where I store all my vegetables. So anyway, that's how we do it. We pick them, we find some way to dry them. It's not a bad idea during the day to just give them a little roll around once in a while, just so that the different parts get exposed to the air, right? And it doesn't matter if they go into storage with a little bit of dirt on them and stuff like that. A lot of it will come off through the drying process. You saw in the garage, once I box them up, when I box them out, I usually give them one more little rub, right? But it's always very gentle, and I don't care if there's a bit of dirt, as long as there's no moisture. If there's dirt on there and it's dry, I don't really care too much. We wash them when we go to eat them, right? The main thing is that you don't want to, you want to dry them out, and you don't want to damage the skin. The skin is what's helping, preserve them, right? The skin is the wrapper, right? So this is all about drying the potato out, drying the skin of the potato out without damaging the skin, right? That's what we're trying to do here. That's the exercise in, curing, preserving the potato. I guess I should also mention, when I go to box them all up, and I've done videos on this before, I examine them all very closely, right? Any potato that's got, you know, a damage like this, it goes in a separate pile to be used right away. Here's one with a little hole, probably because I stuck it with my digging stick. Anything that's you know, this one's got a big crack in it, just from it's just a growing crack really, but that has to be used right away. Right, every potato that has anything wrong with it in any way gets set aside and used up right. They're still edible, right? You just cut away the bad part and use them up right away. This one's got some sort of split in it as well, right? So there's always some percent. There's another one that's got a weird sort of flaw in it. So anything that doesn't look perfectly whole, or if it's got a hole, I don't know if there's any of them here like this. I'm pretty sure I saw one when I was picking them. Any potato that's got a hole bored into it. Sometimes they'll have like a perfectly round hole bored into them. This one's got a split in it. It's probably fine for storage. But anyway, you know, we eat a lot of potatoes anyway, so anything I see that's flawed in any way just gets used up right away. I'm not seeing any here, but anyway, these will be looked over. There's one that's got bites out of it, right? Vole was at that. This one's got holes. Yeah, let me show you that. Yeah, that's not bad actually for a whole crop. So this one's got a hole here and a hole there. So I don't know, there could be some sort of gross insect living inside the potato, I don't know, right? I'll cut that up and we'll find a way to use it, all right? So when I lay them out on the cardboard, I give them another examination. And then when I put them in the box, there's another examination, right? So it's being looked over many times because you don't want to have anything going into the long-term storage box that's got any flaw, because one rotten potato, it just has this effect on all of them. It can, just like one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. The same thing with the potato. And for a pretty benign vegetable with almost no smell of its own, man, when these rot, it smells like a dead body. It's the grossest smell you could imagine, like a corpse. Another point, here's another slightly flawed one. This one looks a bit odd, might have been exposed. This one looks like it got a bit of green. It might have been poking out of the ground and exposed to the sun. So it doesn't look that bad all the way around, just one spot, so I might cut that bad part away. One other thing, you know, when I'm storing these up, I store all the big nice ones like this, right, and the medium ones like this. But the golf ball size ones, I put them aside and I save those as seed potato, right? I get seed potato, you know, buy seed potato every year, different varieties, and I like getting certified seed potato. But I always save some. It just, you know, let's say you know, something wasn't available or whatever. I always like to know that I have, that one's compromised. I like to know that I have the capacity to plant my own if I was unable to buy seed potato in any given year, right? So I'll save these smaller golf ball size ones and plant them, right? Just because why not, right? They're a bit, sure, you can clean them up and eat them, but they're a pain to clean compared to the big ones. They're a pain to peel if you're going to peel them. They're completely edible, but you know, I'd rather just put these aside as seed potato and not deal with them. This one looks like it's got a crack in it. Yeah, I'd rather just put them aside as seed potato and not deal with them. It's just easier, right? These medium ones, they're great for roasting, and of course these big ones are good for other things. I guess I should mention one more thing about, since I'm doing the Uber episode about potatoes, I should mention one more thing, and that is that there's different varieties of potatoes, you know, so, oh, that's got a hole in it too. There's different varieties of potatoes. Some are better for some things than others. So these red Norlands, for instance, they're really good for roasting. They're great for potato salad. They're useless for French fries, and they will not work for mashed potatoes. If you're making mashed potatoes just out of these, it's sort of, what's the word? It doesn't get fluffy, right? It's more slimy, like a pudding almost, right? So these do not make a good mashed potato, but they make an extraordinary roasted potato if you're cutting them up into like quarters or sixths or whatever, and you toss around with salt and pepper and herbs and garlic and roast them. They're great like that, and they're really good for potato salad. These are a waxy variety of potato. They tend to stay together really well in a potato salad. They're good for that sort of thing, right? So it's good to have more than one type of potato, and a lot of people don't know that. They'll buy all one type of potato, and then their mashed potatoes are terrible, right? For mashed potatoes, you want a potato. I mean, a lot of potatoes, it says what they're good for. And you might not believe what it says, but there's usually some logic to that, right? Like a russet potato is great for mash, it's great for French fries and things like that. Good for roasting as well. But yeah, anyway, there's that point too, right? So it's good to have a different, a bunch of different types of potato. Anyway, that's how we do it. That's how we store them. That's how we do all of that. I hope that was interesting for you. I hope I didn't ramble too much. And I hope you got some information out of that. So if you like this video, please like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com, if you want to hear long conversations about every topic you can imagine that has anything to do with vegetable gardening. I usually have lots of different guests on, book authors, people from agricultural extensions of universities, a lot of sort of scientist types on the show, because I'm curious and I want to learn, right? So that's the information I like to bring to my viewers. So yeah, until next time. Get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.